Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland and Democratic pollster Margie Amur. Congressman Cummings, you know, I got to this topic this morning when I got up because I remembered that the greatest registrar of voters of African Americans in Philadelphia history, where I grew up, was the existence of Frank Rizzo, the tough police commissioner up there, who was seen as, you know, too darn tough on black people. He had the nightstick in his cummerbund and all that, and he had the big military hardware he brought in, the tanks and everything.
Oh, I'm very familiar.
Remember that? And that got black people to register in higher percentage than white people. So I'm open to the idea that this fall, with all the horror that's going on with it, and recognized today and marked today by the sad funeral, that there might be a side effect. Your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, let me express my sympathy to the Brown family and the Ferguson community. But I think you're absolutely right, Chris. People, first of all, Ferguson, Missouri, we have Fergusons, by the way, all over the country. And a lot of pent-up frustrations on the part of African-American people and Hispanics with regard to the kind of incident that we just saw happen in Ferguson. And what happens is I think these kind of incidents become more or less a wake-up call. I've often said that in time, a moment will happen that can then be turned into a movement. And I think you're going to see a surge in not only voter registration, but voter participation, because people realize that it's one thing to be upset and to be angry and frustrated. It's another thing to harness that energy and make change happen. And so I believe that that's what's going to happen here.
You know, Margie, we've gone over this map so many times, you and other experts. You've seen how the minority community, which can be so strong in big cities, has a tremendous impact statewide in these elections, because although you can only elect your own congressperson, you can have a tremendous impact on Senate races, on gubernatorial races, on the Electoral College for president. So if a member of Congress from a minority community wants to get the people outraged, they are outraged, get them voting, it seems to me this would be a weapon to do that with.
Well, sure. I mean, there are states in, whether it's Georgia, the Georgia Senate race, or Louisiana, or Arkansas, or North Carolina, where a boost in minority turnout could impact the election. It's not always, I mean, I think, though, there's a common myth that lower turnout among minorities or younger voters or women is what boosts or lifts up Democratic prospects. That's not actually true. In 2006, the percentage of the electorate that was African American was basically identical to the percent in 2010. Yet you had completely different results in those midterm elections. So, you know, so I think it's incumbent among Democrats and among voters to really to turn out across the board. And Democrats need to reach out to voters across the board.
Well, when
agree.
Go ahead, Congressman.
I agree with that completely. We have to have what I call a revolution of inclusion. People who are like-minded. You cannot turn this around, Chris, just with African-American people. We've got to see more whites, Hispanics, and others join together with African-Americans to create that majority to address some of these issues. And one of the things that was so heartening right after the Brown incident happened is that when they did a panoramic view of the various rallies going on all around the country, you saw a lot of white people involved in it. And I thought that that was good because it means that they, too, recognize that there is an issue that needs to be addressed. And the more people that we can get involved in this, I believe the more effective and efficient we can be.
You make that case, Congressman, and you and I grew up with the fact that it was the police dogs down in Birmingham. That when the white people of the North and all across the country, I should say, when they saw that by people who were white, they said, that's not my crowd. I'm not going to do that anymore. I think those dogs, remember? Those pictures on television of dogs biting people and the fire hoses and all that stuff being used against people in their protests warned everybody in a way they'd never been warned before that this is evil, what's going on down there.
It also reminded them that this is bigger than white or bigger than black, but it's about all of us. It's about diversity. I believe that diversity is our promise and not our problem.
Well said. Let me get back to you, Margie. Give me a sense of what is going to excite the voters this year if you're African American, but isn't this situation. I saw that church today. There was a lot of amening there, and there was a lot of emotion, and it was tears. And it seems to me, look, the pictures are, there's the mother, of course. But I mean, McSpadden, but I just think there's so many people that are, it wasn't just Reverend Sharpton we know so well, but it was so profoundly important to people there. They weren't just concerned about one death in a community. They were concerned something else. I just wonder if it's going to wave politically. It's going to go across the country.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't have to be African American to be outraged at what happened, not just the shooting, but the whole aftermath and handling. And I think a lot of the outrage comes not just from the tragedy, but also that there continues to be division. And while it's not, it's obviously a lot different than how it was years ago, as you mentioned, the Pew poll that you showed, there's some other polls, show real racial division in reaction to the shooting, in reaction to whether the police went too far, in reaction to the protesters. And I think that that's also where a lot of outrage comes, where people feel that we're not really understanding each other, not really able to view the perspective from where people sit.
Well, we saw that in the O.J. case, the community reactions. Well, when it comes to the political reaction to what's happened in Ferguson, Maggie Haberman of Politico reported yesterday that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton avoided questions about Michael Brown during a book signing yesterday. Here's the quote. 2 reporters called out questions to Clinton about her thoughts on Ferguson after she had wrapped up at Books and Books on Main Street in West Hampton Beach. Clinton ignored the questions and kept walking toward a rear entrance to the bookstore. Congressman, what do you make of that? Is this a smart issue? Well, that's a ridiculous question. Is this something leaders have to talk about no matter what they say? They just can't skip?
Yeah, I think leaders do have to talk about it. Keep in mind that a large percentage of the electorate of African Americans, and when you look at the Democratic side, is very significant. And I think people want their leaders to speak to their hopes, their dreams, and their values. And they want to know that people feel, that is elected people, feel their pain and will turn that pain into a passion to carry out a purpose of making their lives better. And so I think electeds have to address those issues. And one last thing, the governor of Missouri was recently having a meeting on security and safety, Chris. Yeah. And the thing that upset most people is they began to talk about underfunded and underperforming schools. A lot of this is about education and jobs. Yes. Very significant because they're tied together. A lot of the pent-up emotions are in our African-American communities all over the country.
And I say that every time to people about the blocks I grew up in North Philly when we were young kids. Those blocks are now African-American rather than Irish or Polish, but there are no jobs there. Those factories are gone, and that means the government's got to step in. That's one of my rants.
I agree.
U.S. Congressman Elijah Cummings, it's an honor to have you on. Margie O'Mara, I'd love to hear from you. I always learn something.